Hello everyone, this is Chris with OverclockersClub. Today we've got something really cool. This is the Dark Bass Pro 900 from Be Quiet. This is really the king of the hill when it comes to Be Quiet cases. I've reviewed a lot of Be Quiet products over the years, but this is really going to be fun. So we'll get this assembled with our OCC test system. We'll go through all the features of the case, and then we'll go ahead and show off a couple of these Be Quiet goodies with a second build, so you can see what these things look like inside a Be Quiet case. The Dark Bass series comes in two different flavors. There's the standard Dark Bass and there's the Dark Bass Pro, which is what this one is. Now, there's about a $50 difference between the two. The Dark Bass comes in around $199. The Dark Bass Pro comes in at $249. So there's a $50 difference. What do you get for that $50? Well, there are three things. The first one, this little box here has LED strips in it. There are two of them. And they plug in and you can turn them off and on. There's a little switch here behind this panel. You can get that to open. There's a little button over here you can push. And you can turn your LED strips off and on. So that's the first thing. The second thing you get, and perhaps the most obvious thing here, is this glass side panel. The regular Dark Bass has metal panels on both sides. The Dark Bass Pro has a nice big full side glass here, and there's a real light smoke tint to it. It's not real dark, you can see what's going on in there, but it is definitely tinted a little with sort of a smoke flare to it. Now, the third thing you get, if we look on top here, is actually not as obvious, but it is a wireless charging station. So if you have a cell phone that is capable of being wirelessly charged, you can set it right here on top of the case. You don't have to plug anything in, and it will charge. You won't find too many other cases with that feature. In fact, you probably won't find any other cases with that feature. Looking at the front of the case, we have a really nice brushed aluminum finish, and we have the silver highlights. Now the case actually comes in a few varieties here. You can get the silver, which is what this one is. They have an orange, a black version, and there's actually a white version of the case that is available now too. So this one's a silver, so we do have the silver accents. A nice brushed aluminum front panel. If we pop that open, we can see we have some sound deadening here to help keep the fan noise down. The sides are vented as well as the top and the bottom along here, which allows air to be drawn into the case. So you'll notice we don't really have any venting along the front, the bottom, or the top. There is some venting at the very back, and we'll look at that a little later. But if we look at the front here, we have space for two optical drives. If you wanted to put an optical drive in here, these little panels pop right out. We have a filter panel that easily removes for cleaning. This will gather a lot of dust as these fans run. And we have two 140 millimeter silent wings fans that come with the case. Now, you can actually put three 140 millimeter fans if you get rid of these optical drive cages back here, or you can put three 120 millimeter fans. And if we look at the front here, we have two USB 3.0 ports, two USB 2.0 ports, a reset button, power button, headphone, microphone and headphone jacks, and then we have the hard drive activity light. Another thing to point out with this is on the front here we have a filter panel at the bottom, and this thing actually runs the entire length of the floor. That's because along the bottom here is where the intake vent is, and the air that gets pulled in there has to be filtered, and that's what this panel here does. So it removes easily for cleaning. And then at the top here we have this little, there's the switch that you can cycle through your LED strips here, so you can go through the different colors by pushing the button. And then we have the slider switch here, which is for your fan control. So when you plug your fans into the fan hub, which we'll look at here in a moment, you can control the speed here with this. Now the side panels remove very easily. The glass panel here, we have four little screws, four little fasteners that attach at the corners. And the glass actually sits, the studs stick out, and they're little rubber isolators here that sort of keep the glass from just falling right off when you take the fasteners out. But you still want to be very careful because it is glass. So we will set that off to the side very carefully, and then we'll swing around to this side. I like the fasteners. There are only two that hold the side panel on, and they are retained, so you don't have to worry about chasing fasteners around. And looking at this panel here, what I like is it has a huge sound dampening pad attached, so that helps reduce the noise. Of course, it is Be Quiet, so They're known for having very quiet cases. Then we have this little panel right here, and this actually pops out. It's got a couple little detents, and you can pop this panel out to get a little extra air circulation on the side. Now, you may also notice that we have some holes here that just happen to be for 120 millimeter fans. So you might think that you can just put a 120 millimeter fan in two places here, and you can. However, the only time you can use that is when, and spoiler alert, I'll show you here. One of the other really cool things about this case that really sets it apart is this entire motherboard tray can be inverted. You can flip it over so that you can put the glass panel on this side, the metal panel goes on this side, and we have room for the 120 millimeter fans if you want to. Now this entire hard drive cage area here, all of this can be reconfigured. That's one of the cool things about this case. Now we'll swing the case around so you can see the rear. But before I do, I also want to mention this front door here. The hinges can be transferred to the other side, so if you want the door to open on this side here, have the hinges on this side, you can do that too. So that's a nice little feature. So we'll take a look at the rear of the case and see what's going on there. Of course, we have the 140 millimeter included fan back here, which is nice. You can put a 120 millimeter in there if you want to, but it does come with a 140 millimeter fan. Now, you may notice this power supply area looks a little odd. You don't see the usual cutout. The reason for that, if you look back here, I'll just stick my hand right through here, is your power supply mounts in this area, and there's actually a bracket, so the power supply is inset. It doesn't actually mount flush with the back of the case, which you see on just about every other case that you can buy. And we have some little panels here that are removable, some little sections, some segments. And what happens is when you invert the motherboard, if you want to, you can adjust the height of it. So you have some different spacers here that allow for that. So if your power supply was flush with the back, you would be limited to how far down this tray could go. So that's why we have that ability here, because the motherboard tray can actually be flipped over. Now, we have these hard drive cages here, these little guys, and we'll pop them out here in just a moment. As soon as I loosen the screws here, there are actually 4 screws on the back that unscrew. Actually, there are 3. I said 4, but there are actually 3. But you have this nice little hard drive cage that completely encloses your hard drive. We have mounting screw provisions for a solid state drive, a smaller 2.5 inch drive, or your run-of-the-mill 3.5 inch drive here. We have rubber isolators too to also keep noise and vibration down. But the nice thing is here, you can remove these and in any configuration that you want. So you can take them all out if you want, or you can only take a couple out here and there. If you have an extra large video card and you need to make room, you can only take out the cages that are affected. To pop the top off, which I've already kind of done here, there are these plastic tabs. There are 4 on each side, and the nice thing is your I/O panel is completely divorced from the top cover here. So when you take the top cover off, all of your stuff up here on top stays with the case, which makes this so nice. You don't have a bunch of cables you have to worry about dealing with because the top cover is still attached to the case. We don't have that here. And you'll notice, get this out of the way here, we also have the same sound deadening material in the top. It goes a long way towards keeping the fan noise down, keeping the case quiet. And you can also see we have these slots along the top, and then the mesh panel here. Again, that is for your exhaust air. Any fans you have on the top will push the air out of the top, and this is the way the air gets out. And also, there's a little vented section at the very back. I'm not sure how much it really does. It's not all that large, but I guess any little bit helps when you're trying to get hot air out of your case. So now looking at the top of the case here, we can see we have room for multiple fans. And just to make sure I tell you right, the fans that we can put across the top, I'll consult with the handy dandy manual here. It says on the top we can put up to 4 120 millimeter fans or 3 140 millimeter fans. So we have a lot of room up here to mount fans. And while I've got the manual out, we'll talk about the rest. In the bottom of the case here, we have the option to put 2 120 millimeter or 2 140 millimeter fans right here. So that will pull air in from the bottom of the case, actually through these side panels. The bottom, there are no vents. It's all drawn in from the sides. But if you want to pull more air in from the case, we've got that ability there. And the rear we have, of course, the 140 millimeter fan that is included. You can put a 120. I think we talked about that earlier. And the side we have the two 120 millimeter fans. But again, we are not able to do that in the standard layout that we have here. You can only do that when the motherboard tray is inverted. I did get the front panel popped off, and it pops off in a similar fashion to the top cover. You do have to take this bottom filter panel out first because you'll run into all kinds of problems if you don't pull this out. So remove this, then the top cover just pops right off again. There are no wires or anything holding it on there, but you can see you do have room up here for an additional fan if you'd like. There is a bracket here in the hardware kit that we'll look at that also attaches there, allowing you to mount the fan. So you get an idea what the front of it looks like there. Now we'll zoom in here on the fan hub and talk about it. Here's the fan hub, and if we look down the side here, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 3-pin sockets that are open, and on this side we have 1, 2, 3, 4 4-pin sockets. Of course, these three are already being used by the case fans. We have one extra one open here. So you can control a total of 8 fans with this fan hub, and you can either use the mode where the motherboard controls the speed of the fans in a PWM mode. So as the demand from the motherboard on the fans to run faster comes into this board, it will tell all of the fans to run at that speed. You can also go with the mode where the fans are not controlled by the PWM signal from the motherboard, and it just simply goes by the slider switch on the front, so you can manually control the speed of the fans. Let's take a look at the hardware kit here and see what comes in the accessory box. First we'll look at the user's manual. Nice colored glossy exterior there. At the beginning here we have a nice exploded view of all the components of the case, so you get an idea of how everything fits together, because there's a lot going on, especially when you have a modular case. There are all kinds of screws and things that come apart. Good to become familiar with that. We have multiple languages here. We have the layout of the fan controller hub, so you know what gets plugged into where. Look at the back of the manual here. We have a nice graphical illustration showing the different fan configurations and where they go and the different size fans. We also have the same thing here if you're going to do liquid cooling, especially if you're going to do a custom liquid cooling loop. We can see the various radiator sizes and locations. For example, the top you can go all the way up to a 420 millimeter, and the front you can go all the way up to a 420 millimeter radiator. And then in the back we have more of a detailed step-by-step how the components come apart if you want to do the motherboard inversion. There's a lot of stuff that has to come apart, and this will familiarize you with that process so that you don't end up taking apart things that you don't really need to. So great manual, a lot of information there. Next thing we have are the LED strips. There are 2 of them. Pop them out of the box. We got a couple plugs here that go into the sockets on the fan controller hub that we talked about a little bit ago. But there are 2 of these strips, 5 colors that you can cycle through. Inside the accessory box, we have the Velcro straps that are great when it comes to cable management. They'll help you out. We have another bag of miscellaneous hardware. We have some little extra rubber grommets, a large rubber grommet here, rectangular shape. I'm not sure exactly where you would use that, but we also have an array of motherboard screws and standoffs here. During the assembly, you'll find that handy. We have a pump base bracket here if you're going to go with a custom liquid cooling system. This is where you could mount your pump. And then we have an additional bracket here. This is if you're going to add an additional radiator, or I'm sorry, fan to the front of the case. You'll need this bracket here to add the 3rd fan on top. If not, you don't need the bracket. And that's it for that. And now we'll sort of look at the internals a little more closely. This here is the power supply bracket, and this is modular also. It will slide back and forth, and it can actually slide over this direction if you use the inverted motherboard layout. So the entire motherboard flips over. You consequently need to slide your power supply over also. And this little cord right here is what you use to plug into your power supply, and that enables you to get the power over here to this side. And again, these little sections here that can be removed, they allow the motherboard tray, the entire motherboard tray, to drop down a little bit if we want a little more room at the top here for some fans and a thick radiator. And you can do that when the motherboard is inverted or when it's in the standard layout that we have right here. Either way, it doesn't matter. You can slide that motherboard up a little bit to get some more clearance. And then our hard drive cages here, again, we have the ability to remove these individually. You can leave them all in or you can take them all out. It's up to you. And the top here, you can also take out your optical drive cage also if you want to. And when you do the inverted layout, of course, you take out all these screws here on this side. You can see the little gray rubber isolator there behind it, but you take all those screws out. You can remove this if you need to make your cables a little more slack, but your cables will also have to be fished through because instead of coming through on the back side when the motherboard's in this orientation, they're actually going to come through on this side. So you'll need to move your cables around also. But we're going to go ahead and do this build with the standard configuration that we have right now, and we'll do it with the OCC system, and then we'll come back and throw in a couple of the Be Quiet goodies in there so you can see what they look like. We'll do some thermal testing with the infrared camera also, and see how this case handles the heat. Now we'll take a look at the thermal images with the thermal camera. You can see most of the heat here is really concentrated toward the rear and the top, which is to be expected with this type of cooler. The rear exhaust fan there is pulling the hot air out of the case and pushing it out the back. If we had a top or a front radiator, we would see more heat at the front or the top. We come around to the side here, and again we see the heat more toward the rear and the top. Let's take a look at the LED strips. I've got both strips in the case here. There's one vertically here right next to the side of the hard drive cages, and then I've got one across the very top. They do have adhesive on the back, so once you peel it and stick them, that's pretty much where they'll stay. I took the front glass off the case here too, so that you can see there's so much glare, it's really hard to see what's going on inside when I'm trying to show you the strips. So the first thing we'll do is push the button once, you get a white or a clear LED. Then we go to red, green, blue, and then sort of a yellow or an amber color. And the next push turns them off. Now, whatever color you leave them on, when you turn the case off, when you turn the case back on, that's the color that you'll see. The Darkbase Pro 900 is an amazing case. It has features you just won't find anywhere else, but it also carries a premium price. Coming in at $250, you can expect that there are some high-end features. The Pro comes with RGB lighting, wireless charging, and a full tempered glass side panel. And you have the ability to relocate the motherboard tray to the opposite side. Hard drive cages are also modular. Motherboard coverage includes sizes from a mini ITX up to an eATX and even an XL ATX. The thermal testing shows this case to be one of the best that I've ever tested, on par with the Thermaltake Core X9. So the airflow is excellent thanks to the 3 Silent Wings 140mm fans. And the insulation mats in the front and side panel along with the noise reducing side vents keep the case very quiet. Liquid cooling support is also amazing. It can handle up to a 420mm top and front radiator. The 900 Pro has the fit and finish that I have come to expect from Be Quiet. If you want the best of what German engineering has to offer, then this case is for you. So now it's time to show off a couple of those goodies that I promised at the beginning of the video. First thing we'll look at down here from Be Quiet is the Dark Power Pro 1000 watt 80 plus platinum power supply. This is the modular power supply, and what that means is you get all of these different harnesses that come with the power supply that enable you to only use the harnesses that you need to for your system. So any extra harnesses that you have with a regular old power supply that have to get curled up and stuffed somewhere that make cable management a real nightmare, well, you don't have that with a modular power supply. That problem simply goes away. You have sockets that'll be empty because you're not using those harnesses. This power supply comes in a variety of flavors, starting at 550 watt, then we go up to 650, 750, 850. This is the 1000, as you can see, and it goes all the way up to 1200. So there is one that is a notch higher than this one. Now, looking up here at the top, we have the Dark Rock TF, which is a top flow cooler. And we have the lights on here. Let's see what different colors look like. Green kind of washes it out, blue. There's the amber. The amber's probably the best in this case. So we will point out that there is a fan sneaking back here, or hiding, and then there's the front fan. So we have two fans, and what I really like about this sort of a top flow cooler is that we draw air in here from the top fan, blow it across the first set of cooling fins, then there's a second fan, and it's hard to see, but down in here, and I'll post the link to the review from where I've reviewed this before, but there's a tiny little set of fins down in here behind the second fan. So you kind of get a 1-2 punch there for removing heat. But what I like is it pulls the air in from the front and takes the heat away from your CPU, but then it takes air and pushes it down across your motherboard. So your other motherboard components, including your VRM over here, and then your RAM, also get the benefit of the air moving across it. So I really like to show off a variety of manufacturer products all together. It's kind of neat to see how they all fit and how they look. So this is Chris with Overclockers Club. I hope you enjoyed the video, and thanks for watching.